200 years or so of our Muslim history, maybe more than 200 as well. The focus of the Muslim community was mainly, let's say maybe 300 years till now, till about 50 years ago or so. The focus was two things: fiqh plus tasawwuf. That's the focus. Going back, I'm saying, from 50 years ago till about 300 years ago. In general, anywhere you went to any Muslim community in the world, from Malaysia to India to the Arab world to Africa, the focus was fiqh and tasawwuf. Yes, tasawwuf was the main thing. Even though up until 50 years ago, before 50 years till now, from 50 years till now is different. The reason for that is simple, because fiqh and tasawwuf are the need of the community, the need of people. People need to know how to pray, how to do zakah, how to do siyam, how to do hajj, what makes it valid, what makes it invalid. Who does that? Fiqh. Fiqh is also where you got your job. If you're an imam, to be an imam, you do need to know fiqh. Yeah, if you're going to be a judge in a community, you need to have fiqh. So that's where jobs are. And what do people do when they study things? What do they want to get? They want to get a job. So that's where your job is. Tasawwuf was important because tasawwuf is about akhlaq and character building. So I know tasawwuf may have a negative connotation, and from 50 years until now due to the Salafi movement. And also due to its own problems and struggles, it did not respond well. But it was the need of the people. So the people needed fiqh and they needed tarbiyah, or upbringing, they needed akhlaq, they needed character building. This was the case. All right? From the past 50 years until now, is fiqh remained, because fiqh is always needed. Tasawwuf went out. Tasawwuf went out. So with that, because I believe it taught akhlaq. So also that means akhlaq went out. So nobody teaches akhlaq. You don't learn characters or character building or morals anymore. You're left on your own. And if your family is busy, your parents are busy because they work or they're busy, you're not learning them. From YouTube, from the street, I don't know, wherever, but that's how it is. Because schools don't teach them anymore either. Even regular schools, which they used to teach them, they don't. Today they just teach you information. Now what came from 50 years until now, sectarianism. Sectarian aqidah. Right? So whether you're, obviously it was from the past 50 years until now, it's Salafi dominated domain in general. Again, I'm not saying that in a negative way or a positive way. I don't have negative feelings, positive feelings. There's good, bad, and ugly everywhere. But I'm just saying, Salafi dominated, so they really dominated a sectarian aqidah, meaning to dismiss specifically tasawwuf, and also to dismiss other groups within the Muslims that did not work well with them. And that was it was on steroids up until recently. You should though know that a deen is three things. Deen is, number one, aqaid or aqidah. Number two, law. Number three, value system or akhlaq. I can't make that clear, even if I've said it a million times before. You need to know it. Any faith system is three things. What do you believe in? What are the articles of faith? What does this faith believe in? Number two, law. Do, don't. Number three, value system. That's what a religion is. Now notice, fiqh is law, correct? So law remained until today. People know fiqh. If you want to learn fiqh, there's no shortage there. Now, what kind of fiqh you learn? Depending on your region. If it's usually the fiqh is madhab dominated. So if you are, let's say, even here in the Cape, you probably have more access to Shafi'i scholars. You go up to the north, more Hanafis. If you go to, let's say, West Africa or North Africa, is a Maliki. Right? If you go to the Arabian Peninsula, especially Saudi Arabia, for example, is more Hanbali, etc., etc. So mostly fiqh is region dominated in general. So that remained. So with law, we're okay because it's still taught. You might not no longer find inter-fiqh scholars. That's few, meaning someone who knows well what the Hanafi and the Shafi'i, let's say. That's not easy to find. In fact, most likely you're not going to find one proficient in the same school, let alone across schools, meaning he knows the fiqh, the Hanafi fiqh schools within the Hanafi school, because within the Hanafis there's also schools. Just like within the Shafi'is there are schools. Just like within the Malikis there are schools, right? So it's not just one thing. No, there's not one thing. Yeah, so the Madhab ibn Hajar al-Haytami and al-Ramli versus others, versus al-Shirazi, versus Imam al-Haramain, al-Ghazali. You're talking about different schools within the same school. Similarly, for example, if we go to the Hanafis, you have the subcontinent Hanafi choosings versus the Arab Hanafi schools versus the Turk/Balkan Hanafi schools. And you'll see that, those of you who go to Hajj often, you'll see that. Right? You see that within the same schools. What Indian Hanafis do is not what necessarily Turkish or Balkan Hanafis do. You'll see that in front of you. They're both Hanafis. Or what the Arab Hanafis do. And the reason for that is not one is loose and the other one is strict. No, the reason is on that is different schools within the same school. So when people say, I read, what did you read? Usually they read the, the small A, B, C, E, F, G, H, I, J, K, L, and M, P, and they think they know the fiqh, right? So fiqh is very important. Today we know subset usually of fiqh, of a school of fiqh, not the school itself, let alone few madahib, let alone sort of a comparative fiqh on a higher level, bidayatul mujtahid, etc., for example, right? So, but all right, is the need fulfilled? More or less. Law. Two things for the past. Well, we can argue that even from 300 years ago, the issues of Aqidah were not addressed properly. So we've had about a diminished understanding in Aqidah. And the reason for that is not necessarily by design. No, because 100 years ago, let's say today, Gregorian, we are 2025. Let's go back to 1925 Gregorian. Most Muslims were unlettered. The vast majority of the Muslim community, 100 years ago and before, everywhere, not just here. I don't know about South Africa. Maybe you are more advanced. Huh? Majority, right? If you take it about to 1900 or before, the vast majority, I don't mean by 80%, I mean 99%, were unlettered. They cannot read or write. Nobody had access to books anyway. Having a book, if you go, some of you, I'm sure, if you go to like 2 generations up, if they had 1 or 2 books in their library, that was a treasure, right? And who read them anyway? I mean, who can read them? They consider them holy even if they're stories. All right. So the way that the community was educated is by the shaykh or the teacher. That shaykh had earned what I'm going to call street credit, right? So he didn't just show up and say, hey, by the way, I'm here, I'm a great shaykh, you have to respect me because you all are a bunch of jahils here, you don't know. Let me show you what I have learned the last 3 hours and you don't know. Okay? That's not how it is, or it was. That shaykh worked with the people, had demonstrated selflessness in working with them, bringing their understanding about, changing things. It wasn't show me, I am the teacher here, you all need to learn and shut up. It was never like that. It was street credit, lots of selfless work, lots of development, lots of exposure. You don't just get to come and prepare a lecture and impress me with it, because I lived with you 24/7 for years. I saw you in good times and bad times. I saw you when you just woke up and were you about to go to sleep. I saw you when I woke you up from sleep, how you answered. I lived with you. I know the extent of what you know in a sense, despite my ignorance. That earned them street credit. That street credit, mostly they were good people. They gave the people what they need to believe. You need to believe this, you need to believe that, all right? That's it. If some other ideas came, Shaykh, these people are saying like this, don't listen to them, that's wrong. That was it, that's the extent of it. So therefore, Aqidah was contained in a sense. Matters of Aqidah, belief in Allah, the Day of Judgment, the Rusul, the Anbiya, and that was clear enough. Also, but Tasawwuf was there, or value system was there. Now, from the Usul, we have other things. We have Aqaid. We have also Hadith. Our Ulum al-Sunnah, let's say, Ulum al-Sunnah. Then we have also Ulum al-Quran. We have also legal theory, or Ilm al-Usul. All right, so these things were also neglected in general. Yani in Ilm al-Hadith, obviously fuqaha by definition means mostly, are weak in Hadith sciences anyway. They're weak in tafsir in general. Mufassirin are also weak in general in Hadith. That's just a known thing. And I don't mean by being weak, yani you know the mustalah of Hadith. Any child knows the mustalah of Hadith. And you learn the mustalah when you're about 10 years old. You memorize it all, you know what it is, okay? So it's just so we end of that story. I mean by diraya, I don't mean by just spitting out things. Okay, and legal theory. Legal theory is usul. Because they learned the law, the fiqh, but they didn't learn usul al-fiqh. Why? They didn't need that, they're laymen. They're unlettered people. They depended on the local sheikh. The local sheikh tells them, the way I tell you this is haram because we are in the Hanafi school or in the Shafi'i school, we follow 1, 2, 3, and that's why it's haram. Done. Okay. Thank you, sheikh. That was it. Now, 50 years ago until now, there was a bit of a change. That whole thing that we have been through for the past hundreds of years has changed, especially with the emergence of mass print of books. There were no prints before. Prints were not easy. You could not get a hold of books. And I mean, books are treasure, right? So the printing was not that common. I mean, even my time, maybe, I remember paying $1,000, $1,000 US for a book that was out of print. And someone went and got it to me from Turkey in Arabic, because I wanted that book so bad, and I can't find it. And I kept asking, I'll pay anything. Somebody said, how much? I said, I'll pay $1,000 for a book, just a 200-page book, not even, right? So anyway, in the old days, things used to be difficult, but from 1940, 50, and even before, the print started coming, right? So we printed books. Now, when you print books, you make things available. In addition to that, what? Literacy started coming. People started becoming more literate. They read. People go now to high schools. And obviously, having a high school diploma in the 30s equals probably a PhD today. Literally. Okay, you don't want to say a PhD, maybe master's. Somebody who got a high school and matric in the 50s equals a critical thinking level of a master's degree by definition today, from what I observe anyway. West and East, I don't care where you are, right? Because you were really educated if you had come to already in the 50s to matric, and you know, oh, I mean, you're there. So there's increased literacy, that's very important, increased literacy, and also increase in print, which is good, made things available, all right? And there's another thing is also colonization. So whatever you want to think of the Ottomans, you think, I don't care. I don't have any feelings for anyone except the prophetic era and the Khulafa Rashidin. After that, there's good, bad. I mean, things happen. But still, you can argue, was better than nothing. But after the collapse of the Ottomans, colonization came for the past, what now, 125 years? Until now. The emergence of Muslim nation states is still sort of under colonization. Economic, political, only intellectual. You all consume ideas. You don't just consume banking systems. You consume ideas. All right. So we're still, that colonization separated all these Muslim majority communities into nation states that were supposed to be independent. Supposed to be independent. But as you probably can see in general, politically speaking, I'm no politician, there's no independence, economic or political, anywhere in the world. All right. With that, I'm going to put that as well because I think that's important to understand. So you have increased literacy, you have increased print, you have colonization of a different kind, and the worst colonization is intellectual, not land colonization. If you're colonized intellectually in your mind, it's trouble, because that's difficult to get out. You can get out the soldiers out of your land. It's very difficult to get out these colonizing ideas. Anyway, with all that weakness and obviously shattered, Muslim communities were trying, or so-called nation states are trying to find their identity. So what did they start doing? They went to nationalism, for example. So first nationalism, based on ethnicity. Then whatever, some of them went religious, all that is all futile attempts to identify themselves. In this notion here, probably from the 1970s Gregorian and on, we have the emergence in a very strong way of the Salafi movement, which started off as a Hanbali movement in a sense, but it's really sort of a modified Hanbali movement because the Salafi movement is really an Ibn Taymiyyah school per se. So that's 7th, 8th century, right? So 662 to 727. All right, and that's the school. It's not more than anything else per se. That took precedent. It was able to print. It was able to spread everywhere. It was able to teach people, render them back to their communities. They came with a bit different fiqh law because they came with the Hanbali / Ibn Taymiyyah views of fiqh. All right, to a community that was, let's say, Hanafi or Shafi'i or Maliki, and it seemed to clash a little bit. In Aqidah, they came also with an ultra sort of Hanbali view, and if you may say, Taymi view of Aqidah, which is contradictory in general, in many important aspects, to the general masses of Ahl-Sunnah before, which were mostly Ash'aris and Maturidis in general. They were very anti-tasawwuf, which was eliminated and was labeled as terrible things and almost shirk and kufr and all that. The problem is they did not replace it with any other system. They didn't say, all right, take out tasawwuf, but we're going to teach akhlaq. No, it didn't happen. And also ulum al-Quran were still under-taught, and so was legal theory. What was focused from ulum al-hadith is on ilm al-hadith. So hadith became very powerful in the Salafi era because that was their thing, because you saw, you know, a 25-year-old or a 30-year-old who has not studied any meaning and like not even 20 books in one subject comes and says, da'if, sahih, you're giving us all these weak things, and he doesn't even know anything except that it is da'if. Okay? So you saw that emerging, and the reason is there was lots of focus on the hadith narrations in the past 50 years, right? And that's a good thing in a sense, even despite the ruthless sort of attitude by individuals who are unrefined and unpolished. But that called attention to ulum al-sunnah in many ways. And the last of the shuyukh of the if you say of the Salafi era was Shaykh al-Albani rahimahullah ta'ala. And you saw how much the output, the academic output, right? The Sahih of Ibn Dawood. He went to all the books of Sunnah and classified them as Sahih, not Sahih. So it makes it easier for the fellowship and his followers and the people who follow to say, all right, this is good, this is not good. And this was never bias-free in the sense when it comes to ulum al-aqaid specifically and tasawwuf. Okay. So the reason, and obviously all that doesn't bother me really. My issue with the Salafi movement, mostly, Salafi movement is three movements, just so you know. It's actually three. As-Salafiyya al-Ilmiyya, academic Salafism, which was mostly in Saudi Arabia. This is Salafiyya Ilmiyya. These people are just academic. Then you have political Salafism, or activist, right? So that's sort of like the Muslim Brotherhood, etc. Other movements that had political agendas as well. And they use Salafism as sort of a platform. And then you have jihadi Salafism. The Salafiyya Jihadiyya. Right? So those are the three kinds of Salafism. Existed then, still exist today. And the jihadi Salafism, you'd find it like in ISIS, Al-Qaeda, these things, etc., etc. That's what we had and what we still have. These three factions are still there in general. What is common between all of them is their source. Their source is the same, their aqaid are the same, their manhaj is the same, it's just carrying out different things, meaning one of the things that were, in my view, the most terrible things was the takfir element of it. Takfir means anathematization, and takfir was about secondary issues, sectarian issues from the Salafis, meaning we believe that tawassul is shirk, so everybody is mushrik, even no matter what it is. We believe so and so in the sifat, and if we believe so and so, this is the standard, everyone else is mulhid in the sifat, or mu'attil, or whatever. I mean, just all these intellectual terrorism labels that were used. So the takfir was the biggest issue. With the takfir, I will also use the tabdi' of the ummah, rather than say in non-definitive issues, non-definitive in attestation, non-definitive in indication, that's our understanding versus your understanding. That was not the case. That's our understanding, and our understanding is Islam. And if you don't like it, you're mushrik. Straightforward, unfortunately. In places where they could exert violence, they did. And they killed people simply for disagreement on theological issues. So that's still the case. Today you might not find takfir as popular by the populace, because the populace are no longer responsive. They've listened to the takfir for 50 years and the responsiveness is no longer the same. So you'll find that a bit has calmed down in its expression. Nevertheless, it's present as this part as the foundation of the movement. The movement is very living and well, and I hope it undergoes revisionism. Now, when people are no longer saying takfir and all that, what's missing in my view is an academic revisionism. Why were we, because you hear people, oh, I used to be Salafi, I'm no longer Salafi. So the question is, that doesn't really matter to me, and I don't really care what you are. Allah bless you. You say La ilaha illallah Muhammad Rasulullah, you have my respect and love, even if you call me kafir. The issue is, where's the academic revisionism? Like when you called people kuffar for 30 years, why are you wrong calling them kuffar and mushrikeen? And that's important, not for you, because with all the respect, we don't care about you. It's important for the masses who follow that movement, so they don't follow in the same traps after another 20 or 30 or 40 or 50 years when it comes. And I don't need you to say why your symbols, yani shuyukh or imams of your school, were terribly wrong. You can just say that they were academically wrong. They missed it here in the most eloquent ways. But tell me why you were wrong in calling so-and-so kufr, and calling so-and-so this act or this issue shirk, and why it should not be called that way, why there should have been two views to say the least, and why the view of kufr and shirk and bid'ah is wrong. That's the most important thing out of anything, because this thing is never personal. It's not about XYZ being so-and-so. We're not the labubu generation where you just put something and everybody follows. No, we have Quran and Sunnah. Tell me why you were wrong calling everybody kafir and mushrik and mubtadi', and why that should not be the case for anybody, because now you found the way. But that's never the case, and that tells you that the evolution hasn't really happened. And unfortunately with that, right? And that's where, and again, this is not to demonize this or that, because nobody ultimately can do tazkiyah of themselves, like I am better. That's only shaitanic stuff. All right? But the idea is, how do we contribute to the ummah positively? It's not about market shares of influences and appearances. All that is also shaitani stuff. But it is about how do we constructively contribute to the Prophet ﷺ's ummah. How do we do that? You don't need to follow what I view. I have my own passions and I have my own views. But we need to stand corrected with the text of the Quran and the text of the Sunnah. So that's very important. You can't come and tell me I need to add filtration to the Quran and the Sunnah. Then, I mean, you know, everybody adds filtration. Filtration becomes superior to the very text. Okay, so this is how this far things were happening and the past 50 years until now, and I don't know how long will this go, because now we've shifted also from now, or from this now, has shifted now from religious dialogue between the ummah to more political activism dialogue. So now, even the issues that were discussed religiously in the past 50 years about this, about that, all these things have now subsided, and most of the things that are now today, especially in the West, is about political, even in the East, is political, is more political. So either for or against, so it's more activism, and theology has taken a back seat entirely. So there's no more really theology. It's either activism, and with activism also we came to something else. So activism plus here, activism plus self-improvement approach. So I don't know whether it was sort of influenced by the evangelical movement, or it was influenced by, you know, churches turning into feel-good lectures, feel-good sessions, self-improvement sessions. This is how it became. The discourse became activism and feel-good. I come here to lecture you so you can feel good and motivate you, and self-improvement, Allahu Akbar, you can do it, and you think this is religion now. My iman is stronger and I know my religion better. And these are self-improvement things in addition to activism. Theology has taken a step back entirely, almost, with all groups. That's not just with the Salafi group. So, and I don't want you to think takfir is limited to the Salafis only. Salafis are notorious for it, without a doubt. But also, unfortunately, you'll find that takfir within Sufi circles. Extreme radicals. They're also as takfiris, unfortunately. And I mean, there you go. So I guess radicalism is not native to just one group. Though I have to say, you'll find a lot less takfir within Sufi circles than you'll find in the Salafi circles, because the Salafi circles, the Salafi foundation is based on exclusion. If you're not with us, you're one of the 72 sects. Straightforward. All right. And that was mentioned by like Shaykh al-Fawzan or others, etc., etc., of the movement. So with that, the approach was, how do we go back to the usul, the foundations, which is aqidah, obviously, ulum al-hadith, ulum al-Quran, and legal theory, and we go back to tasawwuf, but now we don't call it tasawwuf as much, we call it tazkiyah, we call it akhlaq, we call it ihsan, because it has gotten a terrible name. And then they fight about it, and then intra-Sufi fights, like who's the real sheikh, you know, who's the big sheikh, who's got the bigger imama, who's got the bigger beard, who's got the bigger connections, and all that childish stuff, and all that stupid stuff, with all due respect, and all that sort of cult mentality and herd sheeps, those who are looking to be something in the world, right, without doing anything. So that also added fuel to the fire. So then there was a need, because akhlaq is important, because in the past 50 years, even when we taught people fiqh, we did not teach them akhlaq. Guess what happened? They came out with no ilm and no akhlaq. But guess they memorized some information. They'll manage to impress you with a nice activist lecture or a nice feel-good lecture, and implicitly telling you how jahil you are and how knowledgeable they are. All right? So that was the case. That is the case today, right? So when we left tasawwuf and we didn't replace it by a value system teaching, we ended up with a generation that had no tarbiyah in a sense. Maybe in Western terms, no respect. No respect for themselves, no respect for others, no respect for the ilm, no respect for their deen. They love their deen, but they have no respect for their ilm, because they don't understand it themselves. They think being in a couple of lectures, memorizing a couple of beginner texts, or whatever, makes them knowledgeable people. All right, so there we go. So there is a need. I'm saying this because as master students, you should be able to look at the ummah and see where can you help. Now, I could be wrong in this assessment of mine. I'm not claiming perfection to it. So, but the idea was behind Madina is, how can we restore balance? Right? How can we restore balance? No hate. Just because someone does takfir of you, you don't do takfir of them. Shias have been doing takfir of us for thousands some years. We don't do takfir. I don't do takfir of them anyway. Khawarij also, they do takfir of us. I don't do takfir of them. Anyone who says La ilaha illallah Muhammadan Rasulullah without negating it, no takfir. I may disagree with you vehemently, but takfir is not going to be there. Definitely violence is not going to be there. Right? So, but at the same time, I'm commanded to do what I can to, number one, make sure that the religion remains like the Prophet ﷺ came with it, in the best of my ability, and standing corrected when it goes against the Quran and Sunnah, not necessarily an understanding thereof, because we disagree on the understand. There's difference between the text and the understanding of the text. Yes? That's already given. We've talked about that. We've hammered that for the past 4 or 5 days. The text is one thing. The understanding of the text is another. We all agree on the text of the Quran and the Sunnah, if the Sunnah is authentic. We don't necessarily agree on your understanding of the Quran and the Sunnah. That's where ijtihad comes. If the ijtihad is valid, your ijtihad is not binding. Sorry. All right. I don't care how powerful you are or what platform you're running on. So then we figured, all right, Aqidah must be present back, Ulum al-Hadith, Ulum al-Quran, Usul, and Tazkiyah. All right, so how do you navigate all that? Is not easy, obviously. It's an ambitious project, but it's not easy because you have a lot of hurdles there. How do you navigate Tazkiyah or Tasawwuf in a way that is good? And how can you do tarbiyah of people when there's no tarbiyah? You yourself need tarbiyah, and people have no tarbiyah in their homes. They have no tarbiyah in schools. And how can you bring people to have some akhlaq? How can you bring them to have some selflessness? Okay, the biggest thing, what Sufis say in Tasawwuf, for example, self. How can you bring people to be more selfless? I mean, that's one of the biggest challenges, right? And it's not, you can't do that in a lecture. You can't do that in a course. It's a challenge for all of you people, that when you go out there and trying to do teaching of people, first you have to do teaching of yourself, simply because yourself needs selflessness. And you have to try to catch yourself, because if you don't, you're going to turn into a shaitan speaking in the name of Allah. It's very dangerous. And one sign of that is continuous progress. If there's no actual tangible progress, then you're not moving anywhere. The Shaykh nowadays in Tasawwuf can only offer you advice. If there's non-compliance, nothing happens. If you can't accept constructive criticism, nothing happens. Done. Makes no difference. All right, so that's one. Though at Madina we don't really teach Tasawwuf much, to be honest with you, which is not good. We need to teach akhlaq. But the reason we don't teach Tasawwuf, because I don't want us to think, I don't want you all, or I don't want our people to make it think that we're making the institution so we have recruits for our tariqah. That's not the case. That's why I try to stay away from teaching Tasawwuf at Madina, whether here or in the US or anywhere. Reason just for that, because that's not really the intention. But what we need to do, and I have paid attention to it because it's a problem, because at Madina we've been graduating people with no akhlaq. I mean, who cares about what the little things you know if you have no value system, man? Please give me a break. Stay away from me anyway, because I don't want to deal with that. All right? So I've been trying to go through what I call, I made a new term called Quranic ethicology. يعني طبعا ethicology is not a word in English, but in Islam I figured, how do we teach akhlaq without making a tasawwuf and tariqah? And so I have to learn your I don't want to go on your tariqah, man. I mean, I like you, but I don't want to be part of your tariqah or any other tariqah. I just like Sufism. I don't like Turuqism. I'm Ghazali, okay? I love you anyway. Please don't, man. Please don't. All right? So what do? I figured instead of even going back to Ghazali style, because they're gonna disagree about Ghazali, and they tell you Ghazali is Jahil and Hadith and all these. So I don't want to go there, right? All right, we go to the Sunnah, they're going to say Da'if, Sahih. All right, so let's leave that. I figured let's go to the akhlaq in the Quran. Quranic ethics. And the reason Quranic ethicology, or if I want to call it ethicology, was not present before, because 50 years and before, Tasawwuf was taking charge of that, of teaching you akhlaq. And now since Tasawwuf is dissolved, there's no akhlaq taught, so we have to do Quranic ethicology. I started about 4 or 5 years ago with this project, and I thought I'll finish with it. I'll finish it in a few months. My idea was I'm going to start from Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen Rahman Rahim, not just Alif Lam Mim, and every ayah that implicates akhlaq or value system in any way, I'll isolate it, put it down, and then give a little explanation of it, and this then becomes Quranic ethicology or ethics. Obviously, it took me about 2.5 years, and I got through about 1/3 of the Quran, or 40% of the Quran, with about 250 pages. And I'm not done. And I was just surprised how many ayat are implicated in akhlaq in the Quran. So ilm al-akhlaq al-Qur'ani is what I call ilm al-akhlaq al-Qur'ani, is actually a ilm by itself that we have not paid attention to before. And that's why in my book Ulum al-Quran I suggested that, I suggested to the academia of ulama al-Quran, ulama ulum al-Quran, or طلاب علوم القرآن, that we need to include not just part of علوم القرآن is علم الأخلاق القرآني, because that's a very important thing and we have a serious need for it today. All right? Allegedly, Shafi'i said, if I can take my time back, I'll learn akhlaq 2/3 of the time and learn ilm only 1/3. Okay. So I'm still about 40% through the Quran with about 200 pages of the book. Ayat in the Quran that actually implicate value systems and talk about character building. I'm not talking about ayatul ahkam, law. I'm not talking about ayatul aqaid. I am talking about ayatul akhlaq, if you want to call it that way. So I'm not done yet, and I haven't touched it in maybe 1.5 years, so may Allah give me some barakah and the time to finish. I think that's very important. If we can teach anything at Madina, especially for the 1 year, after Aqidah and basic fiqh, they need to know akhlaq, to be honest with you, because we're having akhlaq crisis. There's crisis in akhlaq. amongst the so-called students of knowledge, which are usually students of jahl, and amongst the people who we call learned, amongst the people who we don't call learned, we have problems in the ethics issues, where we stand, what's the haqq of the other Muslim, what's the haqq of those you disagree with, right, etc., etc., etc. What is to be a Muslim? That's very important. But that's a subject on its own. The other thing we've been touching is the Aqidah. So at Madina we've been teaching here the Ash'ari Aqidah, which is majority of Ahlul Sunnah, the Maturidi Aqidah. We've been teaching also the Aqidah of Ahlul Hadith, who like Ibn al-Jawzi. Now remember, we have not been teaching the Aqidah of Ibn Taymiyyah, for example, or Al-Farra Abu Ya'la, for example, or Ibn al-Zaghani, or so from the Hanbalis, who are anthropomorphistic leaning, at face value at least, because it really contradicts almost all the Ummah except them. So therefore, can you argue this is bias? You can argue, but we try to touch base on their Aqidah. That's why we teach at Madina Daf'u Shubah by Ibn al-Jawzi, who died 597. He articulates what all these people say and he refutes them. Now, after all that, you want to go to that Aqidah? I'm not going to say anything. All I'm saying, I think it's erroneous. But we don't teach it as a mandate, though we teach it as a refuted subject. All right. In my view, again and again, that's now you may say it's a biased view because you're an Ash'ari guy or a Hadith guy in the sense of Aqaid. I'm really more Hadith than anything else. You can say that. I try to be as academically neutral as possible, but you know, hey, that's an attempt. I don't know if the attempt is successful or not successful. But in my view, all anthropomorphism, all predestinarianism, all absolute political submission are all courtesy of Muslimatu Ahlil Kitab. Muslimatu Ahlul Kitab are people who embraced Islam from Ahlul Kitab. Some of them, Muslimatu Ahlul Kitab, some of them were scholars in their previous faith systems. For years, for decades, like Ka'b al-Ahbar, for decades he was a Hebrew scholar, a Jewish scholar, serious one, to the point that he was called the Ka'b means the chief of all oceans of knowledge in Judaism. The man came with lots of baggage. I'm not saying maliciously, be careful. I don't know the man's intentions. I can't judge that intention. But I can judge what? I can judge the information that was passed down from them. There are others who are not scholars in their faith systems, but they were what? They're public speakers, ambitious people. They want to be chiefs. They want to take the seat. They want to sit in front of the mic. Normal people. Again, we're not talking about malicious intent here. Where there's some malicious intents, yeah, but we're not talking about that. We're talking about well-intended people who embraced the faith. They had serious baggage of knowledge, or they just wanted to be in the front. Those guys came, and obviously the Quran comes and tells us about, let's say, for example, Surah Yusuf alayhi salatu wassalam. But he doesn't tell you that the woman's name is Zulaykha, and she looked like that, and she was like this, and the details, some of the details that they might say, or other things. Islam did not mention about Ahlul Kahf in details and all these things. Islam does not mention about many of the stories in details. Why? Because the Quran doesn't view them important. The Quran views the story and lesson of the story is important. The details are not. Now, in a society 1500 years ago, where the Sahaba radiallahu ta'ala anhum mostly were unlettered people, and there was no internet or TV at night, what do you do after Isha? You sit and listen to stories. And somebody tells you, oh, you want me to tell you about Yusuf alayhi salam and what happened? Let me tell you. This is what our books say, and this is what this. And this is how things started. Until in the Khilafah of Sayyidina Umar radiallahu anhu, Sayyidina Umar caught Ka'b al-Ahbar in that, and he paid attention to this, and he threatened him. in an authentic narrative, if you do not stop public preaching, I will banish you to the land of the monkeys. لَأُلْحِقَنَّكَ بِأَرْضِ الْقِرَدَةِ, he told him. Meaning, I'll banish you so far that you'll only live with monkeys. You cannot talk to anybody. Right? Very stern. Because Sayyidina Umar used to kick the qassasin, storytellers, out of the masjid. Yalla, yalla, this masjid is for ilm, Quran and Sunnah. Leave your stories and how about yourself and what you know, how great you are and how great all your shuyukh are and how great your knowledge is. Go home, man. Sit with yourself a little bit, do some istighfar, look in the mirror, you're not that perfect, okay? Umar told him. Umar threatened Abu Huraira, radiyallahu anhu. مع أنه Abu Huraira راوي. But Abu Huraira was close to Ka'b al-Ahbar. Oh, be careful, okay? I don't want to hear you sitting there. Why are you talking? They're senior Sahaba, okay? You listen. Because Abu Huraira is a latecomer. You have senior people in Umar's time. Hey, 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 hey. Wait. Right? He told them to slow down on ahadith, on narrations, for a reason. Because they're overwhelming the Quran now with all that. I'll tell you what the Prophet ﷺ said, I'll tell you what the Prophet... Wait a minute. Let's centralize the Quran, centralize the Sunnah that is agreed upon, and everybody knows it. I don't want all these parallel lines to come in, because you're going to confuse the people and dilute the picture. And most importantly, you're going to dilute the priorities. Because you have priorities. There's muhim and there's aham. All right. Like Ibn Hajar says in his Fath al-Bari, he says, من شغله الفرض عن السنة فهو معذور ومن شغلته السنة عن الفرض فهو مغرور. Whoever prioritizes the fard over the sunnah and becomes occupied as such, he's excused. And whoever is occupied by doing sunnah, not nafil, sunnah, to overshadow the fard, he's fooled. So there's priorities. Fiqh al-awlawiyat. Tamam? So Muslimat al-Kitab contributed to what? Anthropomorphism, first of all. Why? Because unfortunately, the Old Testament and the New Testament is anthropomorphic. Meaning what? God is a human being that lives above the seventh heaven, and he's got superpowers. Straightforward. All right? So, you know, he's walking in the cool of the Garden of Eden in Genesis. Heaven is his holy dwelling place in the New Testament. Now, we Muslims believe that, number one, heaven is his creation. Heaven did not exist. He made it exist. He exists because he doesn't need a place to exist. He is the creator of spaces and places. Huwa khaliqu kulli shay. He is not like matter that requires place and space and time and mass. These are all attributes of creation. Nothing is like him. Lam yakun lahu kufuwan ahad. And if you actually think that there's something like him, then you're an idol worshipper. Whether that something that you think is like him exists in the world of matter or exists in the world of your imagination. Both are idol worshipping. And Allah, lam yakun lahu kufuwan ahad. Nothing is like him. So that comes straightforward. So therefore, any notion of anthropomorphism, it's coming from the courtesy of our brothers who embraced Muslimatu Ahl Kitab and who wanted to sit in front of the mic and talk and address the masses, because the masses were unlettered, and those people were privy to either the articulation of the old books or the old stories, and they were articulate speakers and all that. And we Muslims are always fascinated with converts in general, because it gives us, oh mashallah, can you tell us your story, Shaykh? How, you know, what made you, you know, so why don't you teach us next time and all that, whether you know or not. We don't have a problem in Islam. There's no like two layers, those who embraced and those who were there before. There's no such thing. I don't like to call the word new Muslims or converts or reverts. I don't call them that. I just call them Muslims, because they're Muslims. Learn, lead. Don't learn, don't lead. I don't care who you are. End the story. Because we don't have any this social strata. I am this, I am from the... We don't have that. I am from Quraysh, I am from Sufyan, I am from Fulan, I am from Ulan. Man, you know the Quran and Sunnah? Alhamdulillah, teach. You don't know the Quran and Sunnah? Sit and listen, okay? Yes, sir.
So many of these stories entered the tafsir realm
Tafsir and Hadith.
Yeah.
Tafsir and Hadith is rife with what we call Israeliyat. Rife. Until now you try to filter that stuff and you don't know. What do you know, where do you stop? Because it becomes difficult because of the intense infiltration and all that stuff. Similarly, when it comes to predestinarianism, and I believe all that was also politically motivated. I don't want to go on there. Reason for political motivation is this. Up until the Khilafah Rashida, we had transparent. Khilafah Rashida means what, y'all? Transparent governance. That's what Khilafah Rashida means. It doesn't mean they're perfect. Abu Bakr, Umar, Uthman, Ali radiyallahu anhum ajma'in were not infallible people. They're fallible people. They did the best they can. But what made their Khilafah, according to us, Ahl-Sunnah Rashida, transparent governance. Transparent governance. All right, here it is. I'm doing the best I can. Let me get your opinion, your opinion, your opinion. Okay, at the end I'll decide. But at least you know exactly how it's happening. You see the mechanism. It's transparent. After the Khilafah Rashida, it's no longer transparent. So if I am the ruler there, and I became absolute now, so I'm the absolute political ruler, which makes me the absolute religious ruler as well, and I'm the absolute financial ruler. So, you know what? I mean, you have to believe in Jabr or predestinarianism, because if you want to revolt against me as a ruler, Shaykh, you're revolting against Allah's will. If it wasn't Allah's will for me to be the leader, I wouldn't have been here. There's a problem with your iman. You're not submitting to Allah's will. You don't accept Allah's qada and qadar, man. I'm your qada and qadar. Let's make dua that I become better, please. That's all. Thank you. These things also there. Why? Because what you've had is you've had some kings or some rulers taken before Islam, taken also religious sort of aura to keep ruling. So that also seeped in our things. Other things also seeped in our tradition from, unfortunately, you say, are you blaming Muslimat al-Kitab for everything? Almost, yes, in these things. Discrimination, meaning what? One layer of society is better than another layer of Muslim society. One ethnicity is better than other ethnicity. One city is better than another city. One people is better than other people. You'll find also traces of that. But in Islam, we don't have that religious elitism. We're just everybody's. يا أيها الناس إنا خلقناكم من ذكر وأنثى وجعلناكم شعوبا وقبائل لتعارفوا إن أكرمكم عند الله. يا فاطمة بنت محمد اعملي. الحديث في البخاري مولانا. Oh Fatima bint Muhammad, do good deeds. فإني لا أغني. I cannot help you in front other than from Allah. This is the idea. Now, if I come and start making strata based on things like that, then I am, you know, it's one thing to have an endearment feeling, it's another to make a strata. And that stuff also, in my view, came related from that. So
is it possible to filter that?
it's very difficult, Sheikh, to filter it. It's very difficult to filter it. It's very, very difficult to filter it.
At this point.
Alhamdulillah, the standardization of hadith science filtered a lot. You imagine that Al-Bukhari himself says that I chose my ahadith, which are about, without the repeated, 2,700. Out of 100,000 narrations I looked at that were considerable. And then there's, Ahmad allegedly says, even few 100,000. So just notice how much on steroid things went. Now, if you just want to take a view, the first one who collected hadith was Umar bin Abdul Aziz, right? Ordered in his Khilafah, right? Umar bin Abdul Aziz, 101 or so. He ordered Muhammad bin Shihab al-Zuhri to collect ahadith sunnah, command by the Khalifa. So that means what? He gave them money, assistance, go and collect all ahadith sunnah. Right? So what Ibn Shihab al-Zuhri went and did, because Ibn Shihab was a soldier for the Umayyad dynasty, so he's close to Umar bin Abdul Aziz. He went and he collected the ahadith that were spread amongst all the people about 100 years after the Prophet ﷺ. Just 100 years, not even 100 years. He collected them all. How many did he collect? 500. Year 100. Fast forward year 241 when Imam Ahmad died. Imam Ahmad says, I looked at about 700,000 narrations. 700,000. What was that? Narrations on steroid?
And he faulted all of it.
Everybody lied, Sheikh. Everybody lied. You can't lie on the Quran. The Quran is memorized, known. Everybody lied. The nephew of Anas bin Malik, the Imam, nephew of Malik, the nephew of Imam Malik, right? Ismail bin Abi Uwais, for example. One of the things self-admitted, he says, رُبَمَا كُنْتُ أَضَعُ الْحَدِيثَ لِأَهْلِ الْمَدِينَةِ. I used to forge some prophetic hadith for the people in Medina whenever they disagree about something. And just to make things easy with them, you know. Wow. Really?
And he admitted this.
He admitted this. So he is tawbah. Like Subki says, the one who Subki has an extreme view on this. He says anyone who fabricates a hadith and attributes it to the Prophet commits an act of kufr. But all the scholars of hadith say anyone who forges a hadith, even if he does tawbah, he's disqualified from narrations ever. But just that's an example. And the man was from the circles. I mean, you know, he's a direct nephew of Malik. Right? Who also lied? Sectarians. They will be a man أضر على أمتي من إبليس اسمه محمد بن إدريس. يعني الشافعي. There will be a man he will be Abu Hanifa and he will untie Islam knot by knot. And all these. That's why hadith al-fada'il are really problematic, Sheikh. And one of the worst things that our generation did in the past 50 years, because they're jahl in ilm, is they made a hadith al-fada'il a hadith of aqaid. They actually take them as aqidah, while they're fada'il. They're not supposed to be in aqaid anyway. That's another story. Who also lied? Zuhad. Unbelievable. The mystics, or some of the Sufis, quote unquote, back then. Right? If you read Surah Al-Mulk 71 times plus and a half, you will go to Jannah and Malaika will come around you. If you read this Quran, this. So they told them, why are you doing this? They say, نَحْنُ نَكْذِبُ لَهُ لَا نَكْذِبُ عَلَيْهِ. We do not lie against the Prophet ﷺ, we lie for him. Shaitan comes to you in different ways, Sheikh. All right. So that's sort of also other insertions that we've had in our tradition, and come and try to deal with it. You're dealing with people's egos and personas, Sheikh. And that's one of the most difficult things, especially with no tarbiyah. It's very difficult to deal. All right. So in Aqidah, that's what we're doing. We need to go back to Ulum al-Hadith, Ulum al-Quran, and legal theory, because that's standardized. We're not going to disagree on Ulum al-Quran. We're not going to disagree, regardless what sect you come from, what sect you are. Ulum al-Quran are more or less standardized. Ulum al-Sunnah are more or less standardized. And Usul are more or less standardized. Even though every madhab has its own Usul, but Usul is standardized. So will we disagree on Aqa'id, some issues? Yes, we will. Until today, like I said, the Salafi school is anthropomorphistic leaning, without a doubt. Though they negate that, they say, we do say that Allah has 2 hands, 2 feet, 2 eyes, two whatever, all these things, and all that, but in a way that suits him. Okay. Obviously, the rest of Muslims disagree with all that stuff, but it's there. Takfir is there also. But I think going back to al-Usul, going back to Quran, Sunnah, at least it stabilizes the scene a little bit. Why? Because if you understand how Usul is, you understand Ulum al-Quran, you understand Ulum al-Sunnah, it stabilizes things, because it gives you now the understanding of prioritization. Prioritization means what? If I have an ayah in the Quran, no hadith can supersede an ayah. That's just basic Usul. If I have a definitive text, a speculative text can never supersede a definitive text. That's just basic Usul. If I have the ahadith fil Bukhari Muslim, let's say, which everybody goes to, are classified as either ahadith al-aqaid, ahadith al-ahkam, or ahadith al-fada'il wal-akhbar, right? And these things. So the value systems, wal akhlaq, right? So obviously, as you all know, and we've mentioned that last time, I'm not going to mention it again, but briefly, even in Sahih al-Bukhari, يعني in al-Bukhari himself, rahimahullah, for example, and in Muslim, as those of you who have heard, have heard some of my lectures before, ahadith al-aqaid versus ahadith al-ahkam versus ahadith al-akhbar and the news and the fada'il are classified differently in authenticity level, meaning the authentication process that al-Bukhari applies and Muslim and others to ahadith that are aqaid are not the same authentication level he applies to the ahadith that only bring ahkam. And the authentication rigor that he brings and applies to the ahadith of ahkam are not the same authentication rigor that he applies to the ahadith that just relay akhlaq, akhbar, fada'il. That's not the same, right? He applies here a lot lenient level than here, and here a lot more lenient than there. And therefore, when you go, if you open Sahih al-Bukhari and you try to take, like they do, like our Salafi brothers, Allah bless them and guide us and them, they take a hadith about Jannah and Nar, in that al-Bukhari put fil fada'il wal akhbar. Al-Jannah, al-Nar will not be filled until hatta yada al-Jabbaru qadamahu fiha, until al-Jabbar puts his foot in it. What does he do? He opens and he tells you, you have to believe now that al-Jabbar has a qadam, because of the hadith that al-Bukhari, which is sahih and Sahih al-Bukhari, but in the bab of what? Of akhlaq and akhbar. He wants to take it to bab what? To a hadith al-aqaid, because it's in Sahih al-Bukhari, obviously. And what the man is saying, al-Bukhari was such a jahil. He did not include this hadith in aqaid hadith. He just left it in fada'il, but I'm telling you it's aqaid. And this example is spread like fire. They open up Sahih al-Bukhari or Sahih Muslim and he quotes you a hadith, either implying it's ahkam or aqaid, where it could be just about akhbar and fada'il, which bears no hukum, let alone aqidah. Meaning, what I'm trying to say, if al-Bukhari rahimahullah were to apply the rigorous standards for him authenticating a hadith that relays ahkam or fiqh or law to a hadith of akhbar, it would not come out authentic. It would come out inauthentic, because there are three different layers of rigorous authentication standards based on what kind of material do I have in front of me. This hadith tells me this man is better than this man. Who cares? Okay. All right. It meets minimum standard. Okay. This city is better than this city. Okay. Sham, Yemen, whatever. Okay. Yeah. Bismillah. Let it pass. This hadith comes and tells me I need to do a hukum fiqhi, legal ruling, halal and haram. Whoa. Wait a minute. I apply much rigorous now authentication level to the hadith as a scientific method. No, this hadith doesn't come with a legal ruling of halal and haram. It comes with a matter of faith. My faith hinges on it. I apply a much stricter authentication level. If I was to apply that to the hadith of fada'il, they would all come out inauthentic. Yes, Maulana.
I think matters, for example, where Shaykh, for example, the person makes a qasam and he says, I'm not going to eat lahm. I think it plays up. And then, but as the Quran mentions, there's no textual, there's no ahkam. Allah mentioned lahman tariya. Allah does not make a distinction between lahm and lahm. And a guy eats fish. So some of the Usul says that it is not nullify this qasam that you have made because of there's no law in that particular text.
Yeah, that's because of the urf and because what the language may entail, etc., etc.
I can understand it. There is today's time, Shaykh, perhaps particular groups that try to move away from the usul understanding and they want to go directly to the maqsad, the maqasid sharia, not following a particular process, and directly they want to deduct certain understanding by the maqasid process.
Yeah, number one, maqasid is a totally flawed issue with all due respect. It's a flawed concept. Because number one, what do you mean by maqsad, man, habibi? I mean, with all due respect, I like your philosophy. I look at it as a philosophy thing, Sheikh. I like that philosophy. I mean, mashallah, the philosophy is nice. I need text, Maulana.
He's only text.
I need a text. Quran, authentic, uncontested, authentic sunnah. I don't need your philosophy. I appreciate it. I'm entertained. I'm listening to you. So this issue of maqasid has to be subject to the text, not subjugating of the text anyway. So it's an aqli dalil, rational, not textual. يعني المقاصد are what, Sheikh? حفظ الدين, حفظ النسب, حفظ النسل, حفظ المال, طيب, حفظ الأرض. All these things have to be subject to the text, not above the text. Otherwise, you're making a new deen. Okay. So I know it's on steroids because people love philosophy. I don't mind. I like that. Okay, but I'll listen. I'm listening, Sheikh, because you're telling me philosophy and how important it is. I'm there. This will never ever supersede the textual dalil, let alone cross it. Right? So if we look at al-usul in general, al-usul, I can summarize it for you in general in this axis. 1, 2, 3, 4. That's it. The last thing that the result of ilm al-usul is al-hukm, the ruling, final ruling. What's usul for? Final ruling. Who is the first one here? Al-mujtahid. The mujtahid scholar. Mujtahid scholar. What does al-mujtahid do? He looks at the dalil. He engages the dalil. To look at what? To look at ad-dilala. What does the dalil indicate? And ad-dalil will give him the hukm along with its dilala. Basically, that's al-usul. The whole ilm al-usul in a nutshell is that. 4. Only 4 things. You have to have a mujtahid. He looks at a dalil, examines its dilala, comes up with a ruling. That's it. Okay. Al-mujtahid, you know, so I'm not going to bother with it real quick, really. Ad-dalil. Ad-dalil either at-taklifi or al-shar'i. Ad-dalil could be either dalil taklifi or could be dalil shar'i. You all know dalil shar'i. We mentioned it. Either what? أولاً فرض أو واجب if you're a Hanafi. 2. مندوب أو سنة. 3. مباح. 4. مكروه. 5. حرام. That's a dalil shar'i. That's the يعني that's the خطاب الشرعي الموجه للمكلف. So you all know obviously الواجب الفرض is that ما طلب الشارع فعله جزما. That which the legislator demanded of the mukallaf to do jazman. I don't know how you would say jazman in English. In an absolute way. And therefore, if you do the fard, you're rewarded. If you don't do the fard, you're punished. Why? لأنه جزم. الشارع يعني the legislator demanded of every mukallaf to do it. طلب الشارع فعله جزما. There's no if and but. Sorry. المندوب, which is encouraged. ما طلب الشارع فعله بغير جزم أو من غير جزم. The legislator demanded you to do it, but without absoluteness. In other words, it's not you must do it, you should do it. من غير جزم. That's the key word here. غير جزم means without saying you must absolutely. So therefore, الشارع, what did he do? The legislator said, if you do the mandub or the sunnah, you're rewarded. If you don't do it, you're what? You're not held accountable. You do it, you're rewarded. I demanded you to do it, but not absolutely. So if you don't do it, you're not punished. But if you do it, you're rewarded. Comes to al-haram. That which الشارع طلب اجتنابه جزما. The legislator demanded that you avoid it in an absolute way. Therefore, if you do the haram, you'll be punished. If you don't do it, you'll be rewarded. Right? يثاب تاركه ويعاقب فاعله. So I don't want to go into all, because all of you have already studied this. This is just rehash. Right? المكروه is ما طلب الشارع اجتنابه من غير جزم. The legislator asked you to avoid it, but without saying absolutely. So if you do, therefore, لا يعاقب فاعله ويثاب تاركه. If you don't do it out of religiousness, well, anything is out of religiousness, meaning even haram. If you don't do the haram, yani someone doesn't do zina, not because it's haram, but because he doesn't want to contract disease. Is he rewarded?
No.
No. Okay. Right? So that goes in, because you're fuqaha, so you should, that goes without saying. I don't need to remind you of that. That is just ingrained. Makruh, al-shari' did not tell you to avoid it absolutely. Told you you should avoid it, not you must not avoid it. Okay? Therefore, if you avoid it, you'll be rewarded. If you do not avoid it deliberately, you're not going to be punished. Makruh. Al-mubah is neither. In other words, what I want you to think about the mubah is, there is no text that necessitates its obligation, no text necessitates its encouragement, no text necessitates its tahrim, and no text indicates its makruh. Nothing. I have no text in it. هذا شرعي. التكليفي is what? التكليفي is, we talk about the sabab, and we talk about the shart, we talk about al-mani'. Real quick, just rehashing, right? These things you already know as ABCs. Okay, sabab means the reason, shart means the condition, mani' means prohibitor. Yeah? Okay, let me ask you this. Is praying Fajr, 2 rak'ah Fajr, what is it in the hukm al-shari? Is it haram to pray 2 rak'ah of Fajr, fard? Is it haram? Is it makruh? Is it mubah? It's mandu? Is it fard? What is it? Fard. Right? So now, al-dalil al-shari is that 2 rak'ah of Fajr is fard. Correct? Right here. But al-shari is always hinges on a taklifi. I have to fulfill 3 things first before it becomes fard. First is when the time comes in, Fajr al-Sadiq. Otherwise, Fajr is not really fard before Fajr al-Sadiq, is it? Nor is it fard after the time exits, is it? So there is a reason for that fard to be there. Now, why do we call it taklifi rather than shari? Because it's not really in your hands. Right? طيب. الشرط. What is the shart for the salah to be wajib or fard? Tahara. What if you don't have tahara? Number 3, intifa'ul mani'. What do you mean by intifa'? There's no prohibitor. All right, time has already entered. Water is there. You're menstruating. Is it fard now? No longer fard. Are we there? We can't give examples, otherwise we'll stay here for a million years. Same thing zakah. Is zakah fard? Yeah, but depends on what? Depends on all these 3 things. First, right, you have what? An-nisab. Number 2, al-hawl, right? A whole year. First you have the minimum threshold. In order for it to be fard, you have what? You have to have a threshold, minimum money. All right, you have the minimum money, but not only that, there has to be another condition. What's the condition? That minimum money must have been with you for a year. What else? Now, so is it, no, there has to be intifa'ul mani' or raf'ul mani'. What does that mean? Well, you're not in debt. Let's say. You don't owe people more than that. Then it doesn't, then it's no longer fard, etc., right? So that's very important. No, I should have mentioned this. I apologize here. This is al-hukm. I apologize, not dalil. Al-hukm. Now I come to the dalil. Al-dalil either naqli or aqli. Al-dalil, you should have told me. Somebody should have alerted me. Al-dalil is either naqli or aqli. Naqli comes from naql. Naql means what? Transmission. Transmitted dalil. What's the transmitted dalil? Quran and Sunnah in general. Right? What's the aqli dalil? We'll talk about them. All right. So let's see how we can do that here. The first naqli dalil is Al-Quran Al-Azim, and the second one is the Sunnah. And I'm going to put a line like that. Then I'm going to say the ijma'. Then I'm going to say madhhab al-sahabi. Then I'm going to say shar'u man qablana. We consider all that naqli dalil, y'all. You all know that already. Again, I'm just refreshing your memory because this is basic usul. The priority is important. The usulis are not fools. First, naqli dalil. Naql means text. Our sharia is revelation based, ya jama'ah. It's not aql based only. It's naql based. You gotta tell me what Allah said, what His Rasul sallallahu alaihi wasallam said. I mean, that's my deen. I love you, but I'm not gonna follow what you say. I need to follow. Introduce me to my Prophet, please. Don't introduce me to yourself and your glory. I love you. You are wonderful and more than perfect. But please take me to my Prophet. Thank you. You know, that's your job. I don't want you in the middle. Like I want less of you. In fact, I don't want you at all. That's your job if you're a teacher of religion. If you put yourself there, you're making yourself an idol. And you're going to be asked. I don't want to see any of you in there. None. I don't care about your views. After you explain to me things, you can tell me my view is this. Okay, I can listen or not listen. I don't care about your view. I don't worship Allah based on your view, or you on my view, or my shuyukh's view. You worship Allah based on your Lord's commandment and your Prophet's instruction. Do you understand? No. These are priorities, ABC. I can't tell you if these ABCs are not so clear in your mind. You're going to be creating idols rather than destroying them. Okay. The Quran. Al-Quran Al-Azim. Now, I mentioned last time, I'm not going to repeat again. Is Al-Quran, so we look at textual dalil, we look at it from two kinds. Attestation and indication. Yani, thubut and dilala. Is this dalil actually, does it exist? And how well does it exist? The attestation could be either definitive or non-definitive. The dilala also could be definitive or non-definitive. That's it, straightforward. Okay, so now I bring the Quran Al-Azim and say, is the Quran definitive in thubut, in attestation?
No.
Every letter of it, right? Every letter of the book is definitive in its attestation, in its thubut. Thubut, attestation means, is it definitively prophetic? Yes. How about the ayat of the Quran? Are they definitive in their indication or they're non-definitive in their indication? Meaning they're non-definitive means accept multiple meanings. Both. Some of them are definitive, some of them are non-definitive. Did I say that? No, Allah said that. هو الذي نزل عليك كتابا منه آيات محكمات هن وأخر فأما الذين خلاص done. I'm done. Already the Quran told you that the ayat are two in indication. One is muhkam, which accepts only one meaning. One is mutashabih, which accepts multiple meanings. So, now as usuli scholars, you know, if I want to make something binding to you, it has to be what? What's the best case? What's the best evidence I have? Muhkam and what also? Qat'i in thubut. So, qat'i thubut, qat'i dilala, or definitive in attestation, definitive in indication. Can you get out of that one? No way. That's binding. All right. Okay, good. Now, when we say the Quran, we don't mean the irregular qira'at, right? We don't even mean the authentic qira'at that are not mutawatir. We mean the Quran with its mutawatir qira'at only. Okay. Now we come to the Sunnah. Sunnah is also dalil naqli. All right. We look at this hadith from attestation and from what? Indication, thubut and dilala. I mean, very basic. Is this hadith prophetic? Yes or no? And how prophetic is it? Definitively prophetic? Speculatively prophetic? Then we look at the indication. Now here from an usul / hadith. So, sorry, you get that mix here. From an usul / hadith, first, I classify the sunnah into weak, thubutan, either into authentic, sahih, and da'if, weak. The weak I take out. You say, Shaykh, this is making the weak equal to mawdu'. I don't care what you say. For one reason, for all practical purposes, you cannot build a weak case, on a weak hadith. I don't care who you are, I don't care what you are. You can practice it if you like. Now that's between me and you. Do I agree? Do I not agree? That's okay. You cannot make a binding case based on a weak hadith. That concept is agreed upon. Done. Why? Weak means I cannot prove its authenticity to the Prophet ﷺ. Therefore it's no longer deen. So I'm done. You like it? You want to practice? You want to whatever? Do whatever you want to do. You can't make it a binding case. So therefore, for all my practical purposes, and I think any usulis who have hadith background as well, I'm dealing only with the authentic. I'm not dealing with anything weak. Sorry. I just don't want to bother. I have enough authentic to suffice me my lifetime and all my needs from having to resort on weak ones. That's the idea here. Okay. So now I have authentic ahadith. So that means they're authentically prophetic. So this is what I'm dealing with. When it comes to the sunnah, I am just going to put here a sunnah sahiha, just so we can get out of the bushes. Okay. So this authentic sunnah now, I will take it. Now we say it's authentic rigorously according to us Ahl Sunnah. Tamam? We come and say the attestation to the Prophet ﷺ, is it authentically prophetic or definitively prophetic? Because the non-definitive is authentic, right? Because this is authentic anyway. Is it authentically non-definitively prophetic? Or is it definitively prophetic? That's the question. If it's definitively prophetic, whoa. If it's authentically prophetic yet non-definitive, which is what? Most of your sunnah, that's nadari. Sunnah nadariya is 99.9999999% non-definitive yet authentic. Sunnah al-amaliya is there. Yani, but I don't need to bring you a hadith from 7 different sahabas written fil Bukhari to tell you that Fajr is 2 rak'ah and Maghrib is 3 rak'ah. Right? Why? Mutawatir, definitive by practice, not by theory. Didn't have to be written there. Everybody practiced it that way for a million years now, okay? Done. No, not a million. Less than a million. Now, I come to the nadari authentic sunnah. What is in Sahih al-Bukhari, Muslim, وكتب السنة, etc., كتب الصحاح, وكتب والمسانيد, all that stuff. How many definitive ahadith do we have under the sun today?
About 12,000.
About one.
Oh, definitive.
We have only one definitive hadith that we all agree that it is definitive. Maybe 1.5, but one. Really. The rest of the authentic sunnah is non-definitive, all of it. All of it. And that hadith that's definitive is من كذب علي متعمدا فليتبوأ مقعده من النار. Ya Latif. How did the Prophet ﷺ know that the people will actually forge a hadith and attribute to him? And then he warns them in a definitive way where 70 sahabis narrate the hadith. Okay. Just so we make things easy, how many hadith are out there? Weak and authentic, there are plenty. Yani enough to know that Musnad Ahmad is about 27,000. Just Musnad Ahmad. طبعا with the repeat. Right? With the repeat. 27,000 narrations in one book that survived, we have it. You have thousands of ahadith. How many authentic ahadith under the sun do I think? I think there's about 5,000 to 6,000 maximum. Maybe 4,000 to 6,000 maximum under the sun today that are authentic. Out of all the ahadith that exist, yeah, 5, 6 probably. That's it. So it's not much to know all the authentic ahadith. You don't think it's a monumental task. It's not. 5,000, 6,000 ahadith, you can memorize them. You can know them. Okay. Out of those 5,000, 6,000 authentic ahadith sahiha now, in all things, in aqaid, in ahkam, aslan ahadith al-ahkam to al-Shafi'i are 500, as you know. So, I mean, it's easy to know all the fiqh in 500. And in akhbar, out of those 5,000 or 6,000 authentic ahadith, more or less, how many of them are, all of them are non-definitive except one, which is definitive. So I'm just going to say, for all practical purposes, all of them. All the theoretical sunnah that's written is non-definitive. Non-definitive in its attestation. Why am I saying non-definitive in its attestation? From an usuli perspective, not from a hadith perspective. Because it's very simple. Look, An-Nabi sallallahu alayhi wa sallam told one sahabi this hadith, one sahabi told one tabi'i this hadith, one tabi'i told one tabi'i this hadith, one tabi'i told his follower, and his follower told one follower, and his follower told one follower, until, let's say Al-Bukhari came in 256 or Muslim 261 and recorded these hadith and says, here you have the hadith. There you go. Okay? Very nice. How do I determine that this hadith is authentic? Or how did Muslim determine that? He determined it by two things. First, every narrator must be verifiably truthful and verifiably accurate in transmission. Every one of them. Every one of them. Absolutely verifiably truthful, verifiably accurate in transmission. Number two, the connection between the shaykh and the student must be intact. Okay. If that's the case, we call this hadith authentic. Straightforward. Okay, very nice. What if this guy here, he's really verifiably truthful, but he makes few errors in his accuracy. His memory is not the best. He forgets every now and then. That hadith could be rendered weak. Between weak and hasan. Well, hasan for all practical purposes is kind of weak anyway. If everything here is authentic, or meaning verifiably truthful, verifiably accurate, every single narrator until the end of the era of codification and recording, what we call Asr al-Riwaya wa Tadween. And that era ended around year 405 of Hijrah, more or less again, yani by Al-Imam al-Hakim, let's say, last big reference of hadith. Okay? We call this hadith authentic, but we call it authentic in a non-definitive way. Why non-definitive? Because of this. Leave the Sahaba aside now. Because Sahaba, we have Adala and all this, leave that aside. Let's go to the Tabi'i and on. Is this Tabi'i who's verifiably truthful, verifiably accurate, is he a human being? Yeah. Is he subject to forgetfulness, non-maliciously? Yeah. Can he misunderstand? Yeah. Can he misquote sometimes without knowing, without realizing? Yeah. So is there a human chance for an error, or there is no chance for human error? We say no, the chance is little because he's verifiably truthful and verifiably accurate, but there is a chance that he errs. If there is a chance, we call this authentic yet authentically prophetic yet non-definitively prophetic. I cannot definitively say that it's prophetic, but I can tell you it's authentically prophetic because the progress or the process is high fidelity. But can I say it's absolute, there's no room for any error absolutely? I can't say that. Why? All the hadith was narrated by meaning, relayed by meaning, not by wording, not verbatim. So the narrators narrated to you what you understand. This is a human being thing. I want you to understand that. I know there's not a hadith lecture, but still. Yani you heard me talk last year and I gave a sentence. All right. Do you mostly repeat it after 1 year verbatim? Or usually you repeat what you understood? You repeat what you understood. Imagine on few generations now. That's exactly what hadith narration is. Just so we understand each other here. That's why, do we use hadith as an Arabic standard for grammar and nahu? No. And balagha? We don't. Why? Well, the Prophet ﷺ is the most eloquent. He is. But we don't use his hadith to be a standardization for balagha and nahu, just like we use the Quran. Why? Because the hadith was mostly conveyed in meanings rather than verbatim. That's very important. So don't kill each other over things. Even if it's authentic, we can talk about it. We can see corroborative things. You don't kill people over it. All right. Now, if this same scenario, instead of one person narrating the hadith, I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and the 7 told 17, and the 17 told 700, and the 700 told 7,000, and the 7,000 told 17,000, and the 17,000 told 70,000. In every layer. And every single narrator of them is verifiably truthful, verifiably accurate, and there's an intact transmission between the sheikh and the student. Okay? What do we call this format? We call it definitively prophetic. Why? We said there's two things. Number one, every narrator of them in every layer is verifiably truthful, verifiably accurate. Yeah, but you said that on the first one and you said it's not definitive. That's correct, because there was only one narrator, and a human error of forgetfulness or misunderstanding can apply to one man. But I have now 7 different people in different places all saying the same thing. It's impossible intellectually for all of them to conspire to make the same mistake. Therefore, that narrative is definitively prophetic. Are we done? All right. There's only one theoretical hadith that's definitively prophetic. The rest are non-definitively, authentically prophetic. Now we come to the indication. Indication is also the same. Indication deals with the language. All right, so now I say this hadith is definitively prophetic. Okay, very nice. So this prophetic hadith instruction, what does it indicate? Does it indicate fard wujub? Does it indicate nadb? Does it indicate ibaha? What is it? You say potato, I say potato. You say tomato, I say tomato. What does it indicate? That's where scholars disagree. What if it only has one indication? Then that's definitively indicated. What if it's non-definitively indicated? That's where scholars disagree. Are we there? All right. So, very simple examples, man ghasha falaysa minna. Or, you know, for example, in the definitive indication, man kana yu'min billahi wal yawmil akhir falyukrim dayfa, should honor his guest. You can't say, hey, it means two things. I honor only guests I like and I dishonor the guests I don't like. No, sorry, you can't get to Jews. You know, كان الله ولم يكن شيء غيره في صحيح البخاري. Allah existed and nothing else existed. You can't say, but gravity existed. I just said nothing else existed. Okay, that's definitive indicated. But space existed. You don't get it. كان الله ولم يكن. There was nothing else other than Allah. No space, no place, no time, nothing. No heavens, no earth, no directions, nothing. No thing existed. Nothing. So there you go. Indication is definitive. I don't need to worry about that. No, but a non-definitive indication. لا يصلين أحدكم العصر إلا في بني قريظة. You should not pray Asr except in Bani Qurayza. Did the Sahaba understand it in different ways? Yes, they did. All right, no problem. Why? Well, it's non-definitively indicated, though it's authentic. Are we on the same page? Okay. Now I'm going to put a line here. Why? Though all these five are actually textual dalil. يعني القرآن، السنة، الإجماع، مذهب الصحابي، شرع من قبلنا. Right? All of them are textual dalil or transmitted dalil. But only the Quran and the Sunnah are dalils in and of themselves. Only. The rest of the three are dalils because their authority is from the Quran and the Sunnah. They don't have an authority on their own. And therefore I claim, and this is not mainstream, I claim al-ijma'u kashifun an dalil al-kitabi wa sunnah. Ijma' reveals the thing that is in the book and the Sunnah that was ambiguous, rather than actually adding a new thing. But that's not important. Let's talk about ijma'. Ijma' is the consensus of, well, first of all, the Quran does not tell us what ijma' is. And the Sunnah does not tell us what ijma' is. We don't have any authentic hadith that defines ijma'. Nor do we have any Quran that is direct about ijma'. So we just make up. Yes, we do. So what is that? Well, it's a good idea. What's the good idea? If the whole ummah agrees on something, it's good. You agree? We agree. Why? Well, because if everybody in the ummah agrees that this is prophetic, it's most likely prophetic. All right. Who gets to agree? The whole ummah or the scholars of the ummah? Disagreements. The scholars of the ummah or the mujtahid scholars of the ummah? Disagreements. The mujtahid scholars of Ahlul Sunnah or the mujtahid scholars of Ahlul Sunnah and Ahlul Bid'ah? Disagreements. Why? Because the definition itself is not Quranic or prophetic. So you'll find Al-Ghazali, Imam Al-Ghazali, for example, including Ahlul Sunnah and Ahlul Bid'ah and the Ijma'. You'll find others, they say, no, it's only Ahlul Sunnah and the Ijma', etc., etc. And that's why Ijma' must always be verifiable. Verified and verifiable. And in my view, now that I've said that, the ijma' also, before I say my view, the ijma' also must be on a shar'i mas'ala, mas'ala shar'iyya, yani an issue that is not revealed in the Quran and Sunnah explicitly. It cannot be on a mas'ala of the dunya. For example, you cannot have ijma' that BMW is better than Toyota. That ijma' is invalid, sorry. Right? You might like BMW, you don't like Toyota. Your ijma' is not ijma'. So take your ijma' and go to a car dealership, buy another car. Okay? That ijma' must be a masala shar'iyya, must not be something that must be in one asr, in one era, etc., etc. Right? In my view, ijma' never really took place except in a virtual mode. Meaning, no time ever in our history we had all the even the mujtahid scholars, forget the scholars, forget the ummah, gather in a meeting and say we agree on this. Never happened. What happened? Virtual. Means what? Maulana Shaykh Nabil, let's say, is a alim in let's say in Indonesia, 800 years ago, 1,000 years ago. He is dealing with a mas'ala. He reads it. He reads all the Muslim scholar contribution in other areas in the world, in India, in the Arab world, in Egypt, in Africa, in whatever. all the mujtahid scholars. And he says, this mas'ala has ijma' of the ummah on it. Why? He did not find any objection. In fact, he found what? He found all the scholarship in agreement on this issue. So he claims ijma' on this issue without saying virtually speaking, but it is virtual. He never met with them. Right? Another ijma', form of ijma' could be like something that the faqih himself says, you know, I mean, there's no way. I mean, how can you say any intoxicant is halal just because it's not khamr? There's ijma' of the ummah on this. So in his mind, it's impossible that one disagrees on this anyway. These are the forms of ijma' in general. And there is ijma' I like to call ijma' tawafuqi. Tawafuqi means we agree, we all agree, like sort of like the virtual, but sort of we all agree. And I think that holds a lot of value, meaning, or a lot of authority, meaning. It's very difficult, it should be very difficult for any student of knowledge, monumentally difficult, to try to make a case where he disagrees with the body of scholarship of the ummah over years. It should be monumental, because this is a serious case. This is not a case that a jahil can make. This is a case that requires such in-depth knowledge and almost ijtihadi tools in that student to come and say, this was the agreement of all the scholarship before, I'm coming with something new. Whoa. Whoa. And if it's a rookie who studied 15, 20 years, take him to the barber shop and shave his head. Tell him to go study a little bit more for another 20, 30 years and ask Allah to give him some guidance. Unless he's a genius and you know, something extraordinary. It's a monumental task to disagree with the agreement of the ummah entirely. The issue of hijab. Just bringing something, right? Not just Ahlul Sunnah agree on it, the Shia agree on it, the Khawarij agree on it, the Mu'tazila agree on it. I mean, have you seen in our tradition any scholars of any sects but agree on it? They all agree. Someone comes to, yeah, hijab is just to cover your chest, what I hear. Okay, you don't want to cover your chest, don't cover your chest, cover your chest. But hijab is fard. That's the agreement of the ummah. You want to come and try to debunk that, you have to really go and approach the scholarly understanding and try to also what? Debunk one after the other in a very academic way. You can't pick and choose. So I said that ijma' has never taken place physically in my view, and it's only virtual. I don't want you to take it lightly. If there's an agreement amongst the scholarship body of the ummah, that is a monumental task and a heavy authority to undermine. Academically speaking, I'm saying, nothing else. Then we look at madhab al-sahabi, quickly. What time are we finishing now? Should we finish now? Is it our time at 5? Okay. So, madhab al-sahabi. Madhab al-sahabi means the opinion of the sahabi. Do we follow the sahaba? No. Who do we follow? The Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Who do the sahaba follow? The Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. I don't want you to make two standards. But we look at things. Madhab al-sahabi in terms of tafsir. Or what we call ما لا يعرف أو يعلم باجتهاد. That which the sahabi himself cannot deduce by his own ijtihad. He tells you about something about tafsir of an ayah in the Quran, which there's no way he could have just deduced that on his own. What do you say? We say the sahabi have said this about this ayah, but it's not something that can be deduced on his own knowledge. He must have heard that from the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, because this is tafsir and something ghaib. He couldn't have known it, and therefore, though it is a sahabi narrative, but what do? We say this tafsir of the sahabi has lahu hukmul marfu'. It is actually prophetic. It's not really sahabi. So now, though it's sahabi statement, but now we say what? The sahabi could have never deduced this on his own. He must have heard it from the Prophet ﷺ, and therefore this hadith, this view of the Sahabi here is actually prophetic sunnah, non-definitive prophetic sunnah, if it's authentic, especially in tafsir. We use that a lot in tafsir, right? Because I mean, they witnessed the revelation, Sahaba radiallahu anhum ajma'in, they witnessed the revelation, so he's telling you from what he witnessed. I mean, that's prophetic. Okay. Then, a view of the Sahabi, but all the Sahaba agree with him. We call that ijma' al-Sahaba. Such as what? Collecting the Quran scripts in one book. Was that a view of the Sahabi? Yeah. Did all the Sahaba agree? Yeah. So now ijma'. Consensus of the Sahabas. We don't have anyone that disagreed. Then we have a madhab of the Sahabi. Sahabi has a view. It was spread amongst the Sahaba. Spread amongst the Sahaba. His view was spread amongst the Sahaba. We didn't record any objection, but we didn't record any endorsement either. We call that ijma' sukuti. Silent ijma'. Why? Well, the Sahaba were obliged to object if they thought something was wrong. Since they didn't object, even if they didn't endorse specifically, we take that as an implicit agreement. Another madhab of Sahabi. Sahabi has a view. Was not spread amongst the Sahaba. And was not endorsed, but was not disagreed upon either. Difference between scholars. Yes or no? The view was not known, nobody endorsed it, nobody went against it. All right, you look at it. The last of the madhab of the Sahabi. Madhab of the Sahabi, other Sahaba actually went against him. Not evidence. Not evidence. It's his view versus another person's view. All right? Shara' man qablana. Shara' man qablana is the shari'ahs before us. Like what? The sharia of Isa alayhi salam, sharia of Musa alayhi salam. Right? Can we use that as textual evidence? You may, because some sharia from before us, or the sharia, remember, when we say the deen is aqa'id, ahkam, wa akhlaq, when Allah sends new prophets, does He change the aqidah? No. Does He change akhlaq? Yani in one sharia you can steal, in the other sharia you cannot steal? No. What changes usually? Ahkam. How do you pray? How many times you pray? What do you fast? What do you give sadaqah, etc. Right? Okay, very nice. So sharia changes. Okay. Now, some things that the sharia came before us that we have also. For example, was marriage the sunnah of Musa alayhi salam? Is marriage our sunnah? Yeah. So you say, you know, I'm going to follow the sunnah of Musa and Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. We say, all right, that's sharia man qablana. All right. But there is sharia of the nations before us that is not our sharia. In fact, we have prohibition from follow it. Can you follow it? Such as what? Making sujood to your teachers or your parents. Did the sharia before us allow you to make sujood to your parents or teachers? Yes. Yusuf alayhi salam, Yaqub, his father, the prophet, made sujood to him, didn't he? That was legal in their sharia. Is it legal in our sharia? It's illegal in our sharia. Does it ever constitute kufr? No, unless you believe that the one you're doing sujood to is worthy of worship. But just doing sujood to a makhluk does not mean kufr, because Allah Himself ordered the makhluk to do sujood to makhluk, correct? He ordered the malaika to do sujood to Adam, and also for Yaqub to do sujood to Musa, to Yusuf, in that sense. Okay. So that is then, the sharia man qablana must be examined. Is it consistent with our sharia? Is it inconsistent with our sharia? Or it's neither. For example, mahar. When you want to marry somebody, what do you do usually? You give dowry, right? Okay. Now you say, you know, I was just hearing from Shah Nabil, earlier that some women here in the Cape, they say, my dowry is Hajj. I mean, that's very nice and generous of them. Allah bless them. For me, I need to get cash first. Give me cash, then we talk about Hajj. Hajj, you need to take me there anyway. Right? But okay, you want to make it Hajj, make it Hajj. Very nice. But the mahar of Musa was what? Mahar of Musa was not even Hajj. He says, the mahar is that you work 8 years for me without anything. Hard work. Now, we don't have precedent in our Sharia for that. Can you make it? Yeah. You can say, you know what? My mahar is that you work for my father's farm 8 years. That's my mahar. You work 8 years, I'm yours. Then you become Isa alayhi salam. Right? So why you take that? You take it, I have a dalil. Where's the dalil? And tajurani thamaniya hijaj. I have a dalil. Musa alayhi salam did it. And our Sharia does not say you cannot stipulate such mahar. So therefore, it passes as a dalil from the Sharia of the nations before us, not ours. All right. This constitutes all the dalil and naqli. Quickly, and we'll finish with the aqli, and then you can go home if you want. Okay, the strongest dalil aqli is qiyas. Qiyas is dalil aqli, not naqli. Careful. Because people say, Quran and Sunnah ijma' qiyas. Yes, but the first three are naqli, qiyas is aqli. Because it's disagreed upon. Okay. Then you have what? Istihsan. You have istishab. Right? You have maslaha, mursala, public benefit. Let's go real quick through istishab and istihsan because they're easy. Istishab means أن تستصحب الأصل. What do you mean تستصحب الأصل? It means you accompany the base. What's the base in rules? الأصل في الأشياء الإباحة ما لم يرد نص بتخصيصها. الأصل في الأشياء الإباحة ما لم يرد نص بتخصيصها, which means what? The basis of all rules that is permissibility, so long no text came to sanction that permissibility to be impermissible or to tie it down, etc. So do I need to ask whether bananas are permissible? No. Do I need to ask what? No. Everything is permissible so long there's no text that specifies them. Yeah? So if you ask me about anything, can I eat broccoli? Sure, go ahead and eat broccoli. Why? Well, I mean, everything is mubah, permissible. Why? There's no text that says broccoli is haram. All right? Done. That's istishab, which is easy. Istihsan is a little bit more complex because istihsan is to deem something hasan. Hasan means what? Good. I mean, can you deem something hasan? Difference between scholars on istihsan, right? So you come to a mujtahid, you ask him a question, hey, I have this thing, what do you think, Shaykh? He tells you, I think it's a good thing. Hasan, istihsan. You say, Shaykh, do you think it's a good thing because of a dalil in your mind? Or you're saying it's a good thing because you just think so? You think so. He says, look, from my reading of the dalils, I tell you 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. There's nothing direct, but because of all these things, I can tell you it's Hasan. You say, all right. No, he tells you, to be honest with you, I can't tell you, I don't have any dalil for that. But just from my feeling and knowledge, I think it's Hasan. That's controversial. Now we come to maslaha mursala. 3 things. مصالح شهد لها الشرع. مصالح نهى عنها الشرع. مصالح لا نهى ولا شهد. يعني مصلحة مرسلة means public benefit. Public benefit. دليل عقلي. دليل عقلي. Public benefit. يعني like Ash-Shatibi would say about maybe, you know, Sayyidina Uthman instituting the second adhan for Jumu'ah. Public benefit. People could not hear, they need to come early, they need to all this, so institute another adhan, for example, maybe. institutions such as Madina or other Islamic universities. Public benefit. The Prophet ﷺ did not do that. It was the masjid. All right. So, public benefits are three kinds. Public benefits that our Sharia came to endorse. Public benefit, there's a benefit that our Sharia came to prohibit. What do you mean our Sharia prohibits benefits? Yeah. Why? Because our Sharia thinks that, maybe it's not there's got benefit. For example, is khamr beneficial?
Yes.
Of course. Right? Is khamr beneficial? Yeah, you can say yes, it's okay, of course. وَإِثْمُهُمَا أَكْبَرُ مِنْ. So Allah says there's nafi', isn't it? By definition, okay, but there is nafi'. We're not saying there's no benefit, but we're saying it's prohibited because the harm outweighs the good. So, hay maslaha, you can't say, you know what, there's benefit in khamr, let's allow people to drink before we collect donations for the masjid. They will be very generous. Would be good if it's permissible. I would be doing it. You know that. It's the only way you get them to give. You can even put your hand in their pocket if they're drunk, and take yourself. I mean, how much you take? Bismillah. Just keep taking. Otherwise, Sheikh, you're gonna need Israel to bring the money out. I mean, even Israel might have difficulty bringing that. He might take the soul of the man, but he's not gonna be able to take the money. Yeah, and then they want you to do institutions and teach and do all the type how and print books. La ilaha illallah. And they say to Sheikh Nabil, please come 24 hours teach. Don't worry about your family. Don't worry about anything, Sheikh. It's not important. Eat from, make dua. Whenever you're hungry, make dua. And whenever the children need schooling, also make dua. And that's it. I mean, alhamdulillah, you don't rely on Allah, you don't believe in Allah, Shaykh? Come on, man. Okay. Number 3 here, maslaha, we need to check. It's not endorsed by our Sharia, nor is it prohibited by our Sharia. What do I do? This is where maqasid comes. Oh, people of maqasid, mashallah, all of you, mashallah, are maqasidis all of a sudden. Under where? Notice. Under maslaha, under dalil aqli, rational, not dalil naqli. And under, not just any maslaha, under the maslaha that as ambiguous. I don't have a text specifying it. What do I do? They say, okay, let's agree, rationally speaking, not textually, rationally, that the maslaha, the public benefit, should be governed by 5 things. Hifdhud deen. It must lead to the protection and preservation of the deen. Hifdhun nasl. The protection and the preservation of future generations. Right? Hifdhun nafs. The protection of the human nafs. Hifdhul mal. And the protection of property, and hifdhul aql, and the protection of sanity. Those are the they said, rationally speaking, rational, right? They said those are the kulliyat, the general maqasid of Sharia, to protect the nafs, the human nafs, to protect the generations to come, to protect your property, to protect your aql, your sanity, because if dimagh is not there, then we have problems, and to protect your deen. Rational. So if you bring me a maslaha, you say, let's do a maslaha, and say we should do it, then if there's no text in that maslaha and that benefit, I subject it then to these 5 things. Does it tick them all? If it does, then we're good. If it doesn't, then we don't do it. Now you can see how when you put this now on steroid, and you want to make it over all the dalil and aqli, and then also subjugate the dalil and naqli to it, you're in serious trouble, Maulana. I mean, you're just putting something on steroid and trying to tell me that this is the deen. The deen is the Quran and the Sunnah, ya Habibi. Now,
how would you reconcile, Shaykh, with the text in Zakat al-Fitr that you have to use staple food? whereby in terms of the Hanafi, that they look at the objective, they give money.
Because the text itself is not definitively indicated.
In our context, I can tell you, we are
Because it's
supposed to be
based on
following the text. The
money.
text is like, staple food.
Sure.
Rice.
So this,
Whereby I would rather prefer sticking to the text than look at the objective of the Sharia by giving money.
Good.
Be loyal to the text.
whether you look, the reason the Hanafis and the Shafi'is disagreed here is simply because the text is not conclusively indicated. The text allows you to do commodities. Commodities, you can argue those commodities were the commodities then and there's different commodities today. That's the whole argument. So therefore, the text was not demanding in a definitive way. And since the text did not demand in a definitive way, we disagree on non-definitive indication. That's all. So, do I want to wrong you or do I not want to wrong? No, how can I wrong you if the text itself is non-definitively indicated? Please do your ijtihad, and if your ijtihad is this way, bismillah, stick to it, may Allah accept and reward you. And if your ijtihad is that way, may Allah accept and reward you. End of story.
So that we can use corroboratively, like to corroborate the actual text.
They would say the objective of giving zakah is to facilitate the need of the poor. Whether it's by staple food or whether it's by money, achieve the objective.
So long the text is non-definitively indicated, that's the space that allows you the ijtihad. No. If the space is not allowing you ijtihad, then I can't, sorry. So in this case, I think the text allows, so therefore, bismillah.
No.
Now you may argue, that's where you argue as a mujtahid scholar, this is closer to the understanding of the text versus the other one. I can't take that away from you. That's because that's exactly what scholarship is all about. All right? Okay. The last thing is qiyas. Right? Qiyas has many things, and this is the strongest dalil aqli, to be honest with you, because the others are disagreed upon right, left, and center. Meaning, but even qiyas, the Zahiri school does not accept qiyas, except qiyasul illa al-mansus alayha, for example. Right? But anyway, qiyas. Qiyas, you have few things. First, you have al-asl, you have al-hukm, you have al-fara'. Al-asl means the origin, and the hukm of the origin, and then the fara', what you're trying to do analogy of. Let's say you bring me a name, you say the name is what's a new alcoholic drink? I don't know. Let's say,
Absinthe, vodka.
Vodka. Let's say vodka. You say, Sheikh, is vodka haram? I say, oh man, I don't. What do you mean vodka? I don't know vodka. I don't speak Russian. You say, Sheikh, I say this. He says it is like khamr. I say, look, al-asl is al-khamr, and al-hukm fil khamr haram. That's established. Okay. Now I'll say, does this vodka intoxicate like khamr? You say yes. I say because the illah of tahrim, the reason that the khamr is haram because of intoxication. And since this new thing that you're telling me also does intoxication, qiyasan ala al-illah, this is also haram. I don't need to know what it is or what it's called, right? So now this is qiyas illah. Now you say illah means the reason. Why was khamr haram? Because it intoxicates. Now if I have that commonality with anything else, then it becomes haram qiyasan. Does that make sense? No. You say, all right, Sheikh, I have this new drink called whatever, blah, 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 blah. Okay? And blah, 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 I want to know is haram or not haram. I say, is it khamr? You say it has khamr in it. I say because it has khamr in it, then the hukm of the asl is haram, and this one is automatically haram anyway. Does that make sense? Qiyas al-shabah, for example. For those who view music to be haram, let's say, instrumental music to be haram. You come and say, Sheikh, look at my nice new Apple phone. There's a nice app where I can play music without any instruments. It comes exactly like a violin or like a piano, right? MashaAllah. But Sheikh, alhamdulillah, there is no instruments, no strings there, and the hadith says strings. So I'm already out of the strings. I tell him, Ya Habibi, ya Shabah, first of all, what's the difference between the music that's generated with strings and this music that's generated without strings? There is no difference. There's Shabah, they're the same. And because the first one is haram, this is also haram. Right? There's a fourth kind of qiyas, and I'll finish with this, is nafyul fariq. The usulis call it. Nafyul fariq. Nafyul fariq means negating any difference to start with. Not similarity. That last one we said, they're similar. And this one is generated this way, this one is generated that way. But at the end they're similar. Here I say, there is nothing different to start with. Nafyul fariq. What? So for example, Al-Quran tells you, orders you to tell, not to tell your parents uff. وَلَا تَقُلْ لَهُمَا uff. So you say, Sheikh, I never say uff to my parents. But I say, ah. Is this haram? I say, of course it's haram. You say, why is haram? The Quran said uff. I'm not saying uff. I say, what's the difference between ah and uff? Nafyul fariq, haram qiyasan. Does that make sense? All right. With that, now we come to the dilala, which I will not explain because I never do. Because the dilala is entirely linguistic. From the Arabic context of what does that mean? How do the Arabs use it? Do they use it am makhsus? Do they use it muqayyad, mukhassas, mutlaq, am, mutashabih, muhkam? How do they use it? Multiple meanings, one meaning? Do they use it general? Do they qualify it? How is that used? All that you have to have extensive Arabic background in order for, I don't mean speaking, I mean knowing the language from its syntax and grammar and all that in order for you to understand the dilala and what the indication of the wording is. Basically, going back, this is all ilm al-usul. A mujtahid engages a dalil to see what does the dalil indicate to come up with a final ruling. And that's the end of the thing. وصلى الله على محمد وآله والحمد لله رب العالمين. Yes.
So Sheikh, I'm just wanting to ask, just on the example of the alcohol, if someone was to come and then say they're doing a tonic, or people in Ginta use brandy, those type of things, would there be any room for negotiation with it? Because if you were to use the same way and you were to ask, is there alcohol in it? And one would say, yes, there is alcohol in this. And there would be a difference if the doctor prescribed it and said, this is your prescription, you need to take it. But if nowadays we look at for alternate healing and these natural things, but it might have alcohol in it, hemp is quite popular nowadays. What would it be in that context? Also,
so, medicinal usage or life-saving measures come under either kama daruriyat or tahsinat or kamaliyat in usul fiqh, which means how necessary is this? For example, which is a very theoretical example, but you're walking somewhere, there's nothing, and you only found a pork. And if you don't eat, you're going to die. Can you eat? You may. How much? Not full. Survival. Okay. So now you say, do we use alcohol in medicine? Of course we use alcohol in medicine. Is it a must? Whenever it's a must, it's a must. What if it's not a must? Then you cannot use it. So it becomes الضرورة تقدر بقدرها. The necessity is measured by exactly how necessary is it and how long it's necessary for. So it's not one size fits all. But when you tell me there's something that contains alcohol and I want to drink it for, because I want to drink it, it's haram. Yeah, whatever it is, right? The Quran already informed us that there's benefit in the khamr, yet prohibited the khamr. Wallahu a'lam. Any other question?
The prohibition of the khamr. So is it in the drinking or in the content? So if it falls on my clothing and I'm not drinking, it goes off to intoxicate your mind. And it falls on the clothing, is it considered as najis or not najis?
I considered najasa to me. Lakin that's not agreed upon by everybody because, and the reason they don't consider najasa, which is funny, yani the recent fuqaha, yani interesting, I shouldn't say funny, interesting because they say umum al-balwa. Wow. What do you mean umum al-balwa? Yeah, but I mean, you know, I don't see umum al-balwa. I mean, you know, you don't have to go and buy, especially for females or even for males, you don't have to go buy fragrances that have ethyl alcohol. Buy denatured alcohol. Buy other kind of alcohol. But ethyl alcohol is the essence of khamr. You put it on your clothes, that's najasa. You put it on your body, that's najasa. Now, most of these companies, now 20 years ago, you see, because I travel a lot, Sheikh, so what do I do when I travel? I go to all these gift shops and I spray all kinds of fragrances. Free. Let me just taste this. Then I go to the other one, let me just try this. I do that all the time, right? So I come out like, you know, I have like 3 bottles sprayed already on me. Huh? Yeah, yeah. Right? But in the old days, I used to look more. I look now as well. In the old days, I look at them, they need denatured alcohol. You can use because it's not khamr, even though it's called alcohol. But khamr is the ethyl. In the old days, there was a lot of ethyl, ethanol and ethyl. That's, in my view, impermissible. Today, most of them, because I go to the airport all the time and I look at them, most of them are denatured, so that's okay. But if you spray khamr on your clothing have najasa. Sorry. You have to wash. You don't wash your hands. Meaning, for example, I just did with this hand sanitizer, right? It says 70% khamr. So I washed my hand with it, right? I did my. So now, if I want to pray, I have to wash my hands properly to remove the najasa before I can, you know, pray. Otherwise, there's najasa on my hand. Okay, so that's how I view it. I don't view it umum al-balwa. That's another fiqh view, which is very, I respect it. They say umum al-balwa means it's just too much to avoid. It's too difficult. It's a hardship to avoid. Everybody uses it, everything. It's like in the old days when they used to bake bread. The baking of bread was done in a cow dung. Right? They make it really solid, and I guess it's good for baking. I mean, you won't get a taste of the dung, don't worry. But that's how it used to be. Or in the old masajid in the Muslim countries, not anymore now because mashallah they're all now very fancy. But in the old days you have birds all over the masjid. Right? And they sometimes live on top of the masjid in the wooden panels like above. I don't know if you've seen them in the old masajid in Syria, Cairo, other places, right? And birds, they do poop on you on the whole masjid carpet. I mean, where do you think they eat and what do you think they're going to do? They don't go to toilets. The pigeons are going to poop right on top of you and on top of the carpet. So they say, هذا عموم بلوى. Yani you just wipe it and you don't need to make the process of tahara, right? So that's another view for what the Shaykh asked. Wallahu ta'ala alam. Yeah. Yeah.
The Hanbali view, like if there's minor traces of alcohol, the illa is no longer there. No matter how much you drink, you don't get intoxicated.
That's also Hanafi as well. I don't see it because the hadith, to me, even though it's not sahih, but strong enough. Yeah. ما أسكر كثيره فقليله حرام. Any other question? Yes, ma'am. Okay. صلى الله على محمد وآله.